Number 10. Alright, well, this happened about 8 or 12 years ago, but it's the only post-waving thing that I could think of that ever happened to me. Growing up, my family wasn't exactly middle class. We lived in a shitty trailer. The area we lived in looked alright. The yards were mowed, and everything was taken care of. But anyways, it was about a week or two before Easter, and I fell asleep watching TV. I woke up a couple hours later, probably around 1 or 2 AM, and the front door was open. I figured my stepdad had stepped outside for a smoke, and just forgot to close the door when he came back in, since he sometimes did this. So I went ahead and closed it, and just went back to the couch and went back to bed, without thinking anything about it. Looking back now, I feel like an idiot for not locking the door. I got woke up again about an hour later, to a lot of yelling, and it was my stepdad going off. Now, in the entire time that I've known him, I've never heard him yell or anything until this night, and I haven't since. But someone had just walked into our house off the street and had been staring at me whilst I was sleeping, according to what my stepdad had told me. From what I saw, he was fairly skinny and had long hair. He chased the guy out, and to this day, we still have no idea who it was. All I know is, about 5 months after this incident, one of our neighbours got busted for having a meth lab in their basement. But still, ever since this happened, I don't go to sleep without locking my door, or setting the alarm I had installed in the house that I'm currently in. So, to the possible crackhead that was in my house, let's not meet. Number 9. I'm browsing Reddit rather occasionally, so when I found this one, I felt I should share my story. It was 2004. I was 14 back then, and the summer holidays had just started after my freshman year at middle school ended. I guess middle school is equivalent for how we call it in my country anyway. I met a lot of new kids. Some of them were living in metro area of my city, smaller towns, villages, etc. So there was one guy whose name was David. You probably know all those middle school crushes, where you're too scared and too childish to even hold hands, and we were just like that. So he called me like 1 week earlier, and invited me to his village, asking me to take my bike, so that we could ride together through the forest. It was the lovely times, when there was no Facebook, and barely no one had broadband internet access, except for schools. So 1 week later, his father drove to pick me up, introduced himself to my mum, took my bike, and after an hour, we were at his house. I really liked how countryside looked like. I've never seen farm animals before, so everything seemed charming. His family was really nice. His mum gave us dinner, and I remembered we were watching some DVD movies, and then decided to go biking. So, as we were riding our bikes through the forest, we noticed a green trailer, quite far away from the road. It was not a camping trailer. It's actually called Barakłaz in Polish, and I doubt you can see it elsewhere outside Poland. Basically, it's something you can see on construction sites, or when roads are set up. I guess construction workers put their belongings there while doing their stuff. This is how it looks like. Out of curiosity, we left our bikes nearby and decided to check what was inside this trailer. The first thing I remember is the smell. It was awful. Sour and putrid. Really similar to the smell of vomit. He pressed against the door, and we saw a smelly, messy, dirty old couch, and lots of slurs, swearings and weird drawings on the wall above it. There was also an old dirty cabinet where some food was left to rot, tons of bottles and trash piles, and a lot of flies all over the place. So when he got inside, he suddenly turned around with a girlish squeak. I just took a peek, and I've seen some sort of case, which was made simply of wooden planks and nails, full of dead animals that resembled cats. Some of them were beheaded. And then I totally freaked out, started screaming, and we run out of this trailer to get our bikes. And now something that traumatized me the most. We heard some sort of whistling from two different directions. Like there were two people trying to communicate with each other, or they were giving some signs. It was scary, because I felt like they knew we were at this place. We started running, and whistling was getting closer and closer. When we got to the main road, we were riding like crazy. All I remember was my heart beating so fast I could barely hear anything. We got to David's home, and I totally burst into tears, begged his parents to call my mum to come pick me up and take me home. So she did, and she also yelled at me after I told her what happened. Honestly, I don't know what the fuck those people were doing in this trailer. Maybe they were some forest hobos and they were just eating those animals, but I don't know. There was something scary and not right about that trailer. All those weird drawings and writings, and the fact that they were living with dead rotting cats or whatever it was, and that they were chasing us and trying to communicate with themselves whistling, which scared me to death. I feel kinda unsettled when I heard the whistling at night, and I just turned 26. Oh, and as well, yeah, that was my first date. Number 8. This happened to me during my first semester of freshman year. In my country, university students like me, who temporarily live in dormitories or resident halls for the semester, often visit their families during the weekend, and return either during Sunday or Monday. It was still bright, and lots of people were loitering around the terminal. It is also quite common for the driver to wait for the bus to be at least half filled before leaving the terminal, so it took quite a while. Then this guy suddenly sat beside me, making me internally wonder why he chose a seat there out of all the other empty seats. But I waved it off as something like him wanting to be in the front, since he was carrying a lot of stuff. He didn't look like a student from my university because of the said stuff he was carrying. He looked like a man in his late 30s who did a lot of shopping in the market. All throughout the bus ride, I was looking out the window and had my earphones on, but every now and then, I could see he was looking my way. Even though I felt creeped out, and my instincts constantly told me to change seats, I couldn't. First of all, he might have just been looking out of the window too. And secondly, the bus was filled. So, I decided to sleep. What a terrible choice that was. I woke up and found that we were still approximately an hour away from our stop. I also woke up to see him staring at me. Like, staring at me and not out the window. I was thoroughly creeped out, so I decided to feign sleep. I was able to take a 10-minute nap before I woke up again to him staring at me and smiling creepily. Fuck. What does this guy want? I thought to myself. I had a half mind to leave the bus and catch another one. But sadly, like any other university students, I had to budget my money, and riding another bus was a big no-no for my wallet. So I had to stomach this creepy guy. 30 minutes later, he was fiddling with his receipt, and he suddenly asked me for my phone. Fuck. What? Is this guy some honest snatcher or something? I ignored him, but he touched me by the arm, and alarm bells rang in my head. Apparently, he wrote something in the receipt, and it turns out that it was actually his number. I still ignored him, and he kept on saying, "That's my number. You can text me there, okay?" repeatedly. I pretended to text someone and hid behind the curtain in the window beside me. I begged one of my friends to call me so that he can stop, but the bitch never even replied. I was on my own. He shook my shoulder and asked me if I was alright. I had to face him again because some tourist in another bus winked and waved at me. Sorry, bud. I already have one doing enough of that beside me. He kept on touching me in the arm, hand, and shoulder, but I kept shrugging it off. He almost put his hand in my thigh, but I looked at him sharply. When it was finally my stop, as much as I wanted to bolt, I had big ass and heavy bags with me. He tried to take it, but I grabbed it faster, which kind of surprised me, because I struggled with it just 2 hours ago. I hurriedly left the bus, but he followed me. I have to ride another vehicle to get to my dorm, but alas, there was none. He tried to get my stuff from me, and kept on shoving his number to me, prompting me to finally shout a no. But he doesn't understand what a no is, and asked if I wanted to ride with him in the trike instead. I yelled another no, calling the attention of other people in the stop. He harshly whispered to me that I should be a grateful little bitch because someone actually took an interest in me. I was this close to slamming my big ass bag in his nuts, but one of those barkers approached us to ask what was wrong. He shut up and left. Finally. It turns out that he lived in the same area as my university and my dorm. I can only hope that he wasn't somewhere near the university dorms where I'm staying in. Up to now, I'm still careful in choosing which bus to ride. This was my first time experiencing this kind of thing, since I'm not exactly the type of girl that one would consider stalking or creeping on. I am that girl you will ignore and will fade into the background. Recalling it now, I was so stupid to keep my mouth shut and not report the guy to the driver. But then again, I was 16 and still a freshman, and I had no idea what to do in those kind of scenarios. To that guy who acted like a deranged creep, let's not meet. Because the next time we meet, I'll have the police on your back. Number 7. A couple of weeks ago, my husband and I were road tripping across the US. At 3 AM, we stopped at a rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska. By the middle of nowhere, I mean the middle of nowhere. The gas station was the only building in the area, and it was surrounded by empty fields. It was maybe 2 miles off the interstate. At 3 AM, it was pitch black outside, and the lights at the gas station were the only thing that illuminated the area. Since the gas station was closed, we were the only people there. My husband filled up the Jeep, and we spent a few minutes rummaging through our bags because I couldn't find my purse. Turned out that I had left it in a relative's car in Chicago. Oops. After a while, an SUV pulled up right next to us. The driver was a white man in his late 20s or early 30s. At that point, I was sitting in the passenger seat, and my husband was about to get into the driver's seat. The man approached my husband and said, "I lost my iPhone here. Have you seen it?" Suddenly, a sense of dread filled the pit of my stomach, as I noticed that he already had a phone, a flip phone in his hip. I studied his face. While he looked unassuming, there was something off about him. Something sinister. "I must have left it in that field over there," he said. The field was pitch black. "Can you help me look for it?" My husband already had his iPhone out with the flashlight on. He's such a good Samaritan. He started to follow the man. I whipped out my phone and texted him, "Leave." My husband immediately saw the text and looked at me. I must have looked terrified because he ran, jumped into the car, and we booked out of there. As we were leaving, I looked back and saw the man get into his car. We drove for about 20 miles on the interstate to a rest stop and slept there. After a short time, my husband woke me up and told me to look through the passenger side window. The man had pulled up right next to us. There was some empty parking spaces at the rest stop, and he still parked next to us. The creepy part is that we were parked at the very end of the rest stop, and the spot next to us wasn't a parking space. We had our seats down to help us sleep, so he probably didn't see that we were in our Jeep. We quietly watched him get out of his car, look over our Jeep, and walk into the building, probably looking for us. As soon as he entered the building, we snapped our seats back up and hauled us out of there. We drove for about 50 miles and found a hotel about 6 miles north of the interstate. We never saw him again. Number 6. Hi there. I just want to start this off by saying that this happened way back, so all the information is kinda hazy, but I'll try my best. Also, I'll be using fake names for safety reasons. Almost 5 years ago, my wife and I had our first child. It was the best moment of our life. Skip ahead 3 months. All of our family, from both sides, were over for a barbecue. We both have pretty small families. Everyone had a good time. At 11ish, everybody started heading out. We put Ali in her crib and started to clean up. Me and Michaela went to bed pretty easily. At about 2:30, she shook me awake, breathing heavily. I asked her what was wrong. She was holding the baby monitor to her chest. She started rambling on about she thought that it was me or something. I finally snatched the monitor from her. God, I wish I could unsee what I saw. The monitor was pointed at the crib, but also at the room a bit. And someone was holding our goddamn child and walking around with her as anyone would to put a baby back to sleep. I called the police right away and then grabbed my gun. I started to get out of bed, but Michaela stopped me. What if he does something to Ali? I was pissed, but she was right. If I busted in there, that fucker would probably drop my little girl. After the longest 13 minutes of my life, we heard the police sirens. My eyes were glued to that monitor as he placed her in the crib and went into the closet. My wife sprinted to the door and led the officers to the baby's room. They brought out the guy and put him into the cop car. I walked up to the car and just stared at him. He was your typical meth head Hoosier. He mouthed something that gave me the chills even to this day. She's a cute kid. The cop car drove off while I just stood there, red hot mad and scared. I couldn't sleep solid for 2 days after that. So, Mr. Meth Head, let's not meet again. And if we do, you had better bring a weapon to defend yourself. Number 5. This is my first post on Reddit, but this sub reminded me of this story. I know there's a much more interesting story in this sub about the survivor of Ted Bundy, but I still find this story interesting. It puts into perspective how many people out there may have had close calls with serial killers. My dad can be pretty paranoid, but he's still a reasonable man. And come to think of it, this story may be the cause of that paranoia. Anyways, this story takes place back in the good old days, specifically between 1978 and 1991. My dad was at the Grand Avenue Mall. He always lived in some sort of Milwaukee suburb, less than 30 minutes away from the actual city. So he's walking around the mall, doing whatever, when he notices this man following him. He brushes it off for a bit, thinking he was one of those undercover security guards. A few minutes later, after he left the store, this guy is still tailing him. To test whether this guy was really following him, he made a few pointless detours, ones that the man following him would only be mimicking if he was indeed following him. Needless to say, the man was still walking comfortably behind him. From that point, my dad knew something was wrong and made his way to the nearest mall security guard. When he turned around, the guy was hightailing it out of there. About a year later, my dad was watching the news, only to recognise the mugshot of this stalker, if you will, which was identified to be the man known as the one and only Jeffrey Dahmer. Number 4. About a year ago, for the month of June, my family went to France for 4 weeks and let me tend to the house and take care of the animals. My house is in an interesting location. It is an hour from the campus I go to school on, and a 30-minute drive from my work, and 20 minutes from the main town. My neighbours and I have a few acres in between each other, and the closest house to me is a 10-minute drive. My house is surrounded by farmers' fields, military property, and then miles and miles of BLM land, surrounded by mountains. Sometimes I feel like I live in the house from Courage the Cowardly Dog because of how in the middle of nowhere it is, and how lots of weird stuff happens in it. If you were to Google what a 2-story house looks like, this would be exactly what my house looks like, except it's a 1-story. The 2nd story, where all the windows are, is just ceiling space. There are also lofts in my house, where my landlord was going to put the 2nd story, but he never got round to it. It was like they tried to build a 2-story house, but realised there was nowhere to put the stairwell. There is also a large basement, and an attic. I have lived in this house for 8 years, and have always felt that the house had a weird layout. Next to my room, there is a huge wall that connects to the living room wall. But my room isn't as big as the wall, so there is just a large wall between the living room and my room. Underneath my room is the stairs to the unfinished basement. Now that you understand the layout of my house, you'd understand why there would be lots of birds' nests on the roof. The birds congregate on top of my room during the summer, because that's when most of the bugs are out for them to catch, and because we feed our cat just below. My room acts for like a funnel for the noise of them scratching on the roof and running around. About 2 weeks after my family left for France, the birds started their scratching noises on top of my roof. They do it every hour or so all day, and all night. It's a very unsettling sound to hear at 3 in the morning, and it's really annoying. Then, I started to hear scratching and banging sounds coming from the wall next to me, which is why I thought we had rats in our walls. My mum assured me over Skype that it was probably just birds on the roof like normal. The next few days, I kept hearing the scratching noises and the banging sounds coming from my wall. Finally, I decided that it was time to check the closets and the basements for signs of mice or rats, so I could buy the proper traps. After checking the basement, I don't find any signs of mice, so I go to check the hall closet, which is the only thing in between my living room and my room. It's usually locked, because it's full of a bunch of yard tools, and my dad's shotgun, my archery equipment, and a handgun. It's locked because my youngest brother could seriously injure himself. I assume it's locked, but I still check the handle, and it opens. I thought maybe my stepdad unlocked it, just in case I needed a gun to protect myself. The first thing I notice when I open the closet is that all the tools are moved to the far side, and a portion of the closet wall is missing. At this point, I'm freaking the frack out and call my best friend and her dad to come over and check it out. I thought about calling the police, but since I live far from a lot of things, I figured me discovering a hole in the wall probably wasn't enough to send them out. My best friend's dad and brother came over and used flashlights to look in the hole. They don't see anything super weird, so my friend's dad gets on his hands and knees and goes into the hole. When he gets out, he has a look of horror on his face and tells us that he found a dirty mattress, a pair of man-sized jeans, chicken feathers everywhere, and a whole Walmart chicken partially eaten. He calls the police, and they search the whole house and find no one, and nothing out of the ordinary. My friend's dad nails a slab of wood over the hole, and I have all the locks changed. The creepy compartment in my closet has since then been sealed up. The scary thing is that because I work during the day and leave the house unlocked most of the time, the guy who lived in there could have come and gone as he pleased until when I was home. I have 8 dogs, which is the reason my family needs me to stay home, and I never heard any of them bark during the time the banging started, which means the man probably lived in my house a long time, and my dogs got used to him. I, being a generous horror story narrator on YouTube, I will say that you can read my story if you want to just credit me. It'd be cool if you mentioned my channel name. My channel name is The Bella Bubbles. Number 3. This is the real account of my experience as a chaperone for a blind date. I witnessed the events, and I was put in danger along with my friends. Let me introduce the people involved to clear things up a bit. And a little note, this happened like 10 years ago, when I was 14. So there's Asia, the girl involved in the date. At the time she was 14 years old too. Being a little too open, she had tons of dates. Her parents were nice, but let her do whatever she wanted, and dress like an older girl. She never got into trouble, because we had the luck to live in a small, nice town. Danielle, the other chaperone, 14 years old as well. She was a shy girl with a strict mother, and thus always divided between rebellion and obedience. She was also prone to panic easily. Anyway, back to the story. At the time, dating sites weren't so common, and chat rooms had quite a crude look. Just a box for text, and no space for pics or whatever. So if you decided to meet someone, you had to trust him or her blindly, which is exactly what Asia did. She met this guy in a football dedicated chat room, and being a little bit of an exhibitionist, she immediately tried to seduce him. We all call him Tommy. Tommy's said to be 20, to be tall with dark hair and green eyes, to be cute but not dashing. Asia told us that he was very charming and funny, and also a great football fan. He made her laugh and asked her about a day. He wanted to meet her, just a coffee. Plus he had some autographs of her favourite singers, and was willing to give them to her. She accepted to see him, and they decided to meet in Tommy's city. He lived almost an hour from us. She asked us to go with her, and obviously we accepted. At this point, we already made some gross errors. Number 1, agreed to meet an older stranger. Number 2, we didn't tell anyone where we were going. And number 3, we went in a city we didn't know well, in a non-touristic area. Tommy gave Asia an address, telling her that it was a small and cosy cafe near a park, not too distant from his place. Let me tell you, he lied. When we got there, we saw the bar in the park, but the place was small and isolated, and the park was more like a parking with some trees. It was a rundown area, with few shops and big, old and sad condos. Tommy wasn't better than the surroundings. He was obviously older, weedy, and with a short goatee. I instantly knew that we had fucked up. Danielle was clearly scared, but Asia, all dolled up with skinny jeans and a padded bra, too proud to accept the failure, marched toward him smiling and waving her hand. When he saw me and Danielle, his face darkened, but he kept smiling and embraced Asia, telling her that she was beautiful, and handing her the autographs. He was fake and rubbish, I can tell it now. Then an awkward silence fell onto us. Tommy, if it was his name, clearly lost in his thoughts. Asia proposed to go to the mall, but Tommy redirected us to a small and dirty nearby bar. The nightmare began. He bought us a coffee and told us to drink quickly. He wanted to smoke a cigarette at the park and talk there. Then he grabbed Asia's hand and started walking very fast, like he was trying to lose Danielle and me. Near the parking, we saw a car with 2 guys in it, clearly looking at Tommy like they were waiting for him. At this point, Danielle was trembling and breathing hard. Asia was pale and was walking like she was going to faint. So I did what I could. I yanked her hand and screamed, "We have to go home. Asia, let's go." Tommy let her go and hissed something while we ran towards the bus stop. When we got there, the bus was already there and we safely took it. But you know what? The car, with Tommy and the guys in it, arrived at the bus stop in that exact moment. If the bus had just come a few minutes later, we would have been fucked. We cried all the way home. Tommy and friends, let's not meet again. Number 2. This happened to me 3 days ago. So, I was home alone. My mum was at her friend's place for a Game of Thrones marathon, and her friend lives 40 minutes away. And it was a Saturday, which is my junk food night. So, I ordered a Domino's pizza at roughly 7:30 PM. I'm quite paranoid as a result of my previous events, so I made sure to lock the back door, patio door, and front door as soon as my mum left, which was at 6 PM. The Domino's tracker said that my pizza was an hour away, which frustrated me. But it's pizza, so it's worth it. Anywho, I was sitting on the couch in my lounge room, watching Shawshank Redemption for the 100th time, when I heard a crunching sound from outside the window. Now, I have to mention that my lounge room is at the front of my house, and the couch that I was sitting on was right next to the front window that faces my front yard, and the curtains were drawn. It was a very distinct crunching sound, like someone stomping on a pile of saltine crackers. I peeked outside, and this guy was just pacing back and forth on the pebbles, directly outside of the window. It shocked me so much that I said fuck rather loudly and let go of the curtain, so that it once again covered the window. I guess the guy must have heard me, because I heard a tap 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 on my window not 5 seconds later. I stayed silent, not knowing what to do. I contemplated calling the cops, but I thought I might be wasting their time, as I didn't know if pacing on someone's lawn was considered illegal. I decided to ignore it and pretend like nothing was happening. But I heard a smashing sound, and quickly looked out of the window to see that the guy had tripped over my mother's ceramic angel that had been placed near the patch of flowers. And yes, it broke. He was on the ground and he looked up at me. I didn't see his face. I only saw some curly blonde hair. I quickly closed the curtains, just then realising that he had seen me too. I heard him say something, but the volume on the TV was too high, so out of curiosity I turned it down. It turns out that he was just saying, "Hey pretty lady," over and over again. I heard a car pull up my driveway and some talking. Then the doorbell rang. I ran up and looked through the peephole. I completely forgot that I had ordered the pizza. I opened the door for the pizza delivery man and greeted him, glad to see a comforting face. As he handed me the pizza, he said, "I would have given it to your boyfriend, but he just said that he didn't have money on him, and that his girlfriend was inside and she would pay. I'm assuming that's you." I'm pretty sure that my jaw dropped. I hurriedly explained to the pizza guy that I didn't have a boyfriend, and there was just some creep in my yard. I asked him to look and see if the guy was still there, and he said he wasn't. I paid for my pizza, and the pizza guy left, but not before telling me to make sure to lock my doors. Nothing happened after that point, but I will update you if anything ever happens again. So thank you to the pizza man for scaring off the creep in my yard, and to the creep himself, let's not meet. Number 1. When I was in high school, my nerdy friends and I would spend the weekends hosting Nerf Wars on the campus grounds. On this particular Sunday, we decided to play Capture the Flag. I was in the zone. I went solo and snuck up behind the other team's base, which was only guarded by one kid. We'll call him Brian. I was puzzled by his stance. He wasn't very aware, or worried about someone capturing the flag. Something yonder was freezing him, in what looked like fear. I jumped over the fence surrounding the flag, grabbed it, and shot Brian, excitedly. "Gotcha," I declared. But it was like my friend was paralysed, and playing with Nerf guns was the last thing on his mind. "I'm out. Dude, look over there," he stammered, pointing towards the grassy knoll roughly 50 to 100 feet away. What I saw shattered my entire physique. In broad daylight, in the middle of the knoll, where the goth kids ate lunch every day, stood a large man with purple pants down to his ankles. What made this image disturbing was that he was staring up at the sun, squinting his eyes, and masturbating furiously. Brian and I hid immediately. What do? We asked each other. We decided to find the rest of the friends. When we popped out from behind a building, the man in purple pants had vanished in less than 15 seconds. We rounded up the posse of geeks with Nerf guns and decided to get some vigilante justice or call the cops once we found him. But he literally disappeared. We never saw him again, but the image was burned in our heads forever. That grassy knoll will never be the same. So, man in the purple pants? Let's not meet. Ever. I don't even want to know what disturbing activities you're up to now. I certainly can't forget you, no matter how hard I try. Well, anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, share and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out the Bella Bubbles. I will link her channel in the description below for you guys. Also, if you have any stories of your own which you would like to have shared, then please make sure to contact me, link in the description, and you may be featured in a future video. Well, anyway, I hope to see you soon, and I will speak to you later.